They thought she was just another missing wife. A cryptic note, a locked door, and a dog left for dead in a junkyard no one cared about. But fate had other plans. He was just a small-town cop until the day he rescued a battered German shepherd and stumbled onto a trail darker than anything he'd seen before. Every clue led him closer to a chilling truth. His wife hadn't left by choice, and the dog he'd saved was the only witness left alive. What happened next will break your heart and restore your faith in loyalty, love, and the magic of second chances. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you believe that every lost soul deserves to come home, if you believe that even a broken dog can be a hero, hit subscribe, because this is a story you'll never forget. The wind howled down the empty streets of outer Portland, lashing cold rain across yellowed patches of snow and rattling the loose tin of old garages. The city center slept, but out here on the industrial edge, where warehouses faded into muddy lots and the faint reek of oil drifted up from forgotten machine shops, a different kind of night ruled. Fog coiled low across the pavement, obscuring the few streetlights left unbroken, and every passing car seemed to vanish into a dream. Matt Turner's police cruiser rolled slowly down Collier Avenue, headlights thin in the swirling mist. He was a big man, broad in the shoulders but gentle in the hands, face framed by a week's worth of dark stubble and tired gray eyes. At 40, Matt still had the stride of an athlete, but his gaze had softened through years of seeing more pain than glory. Most nights he hummed softly to keep his mind busy, but tonight the city felt unusually still, as if holding its breath. Matt had always liked the night shift. He liked the quiet, the hum of his own thoughts, and the way the world seemed more honest at 2 a.m. Maybe that's why he was the first to hear it. A thin, broken whimper, rising and falling somewhere beyond the fence of the old Collier junkyard. He slowed, engine idling. For a moment, Matt wondered if he'd imagined it, maybe a stray cat, or the wind whistling through piles of scrap. But then the sound came again, desperate, pleading. No, not a cat. Something bigger and hurt. He left the cruiser running, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out into the wet. The air bit at his cheeks. The junkyard loomed ahead, a chaos of rusted cars and collapsed metal fencing. Matt squeezed through a gap, boots sinking into cold mud, and swept his light over the heaps of twisted steel. The sound was louder now, echoing between hollow hoods and shattered glass. He moved with practiced caution, alert for anything human or otherwise. There, a battered black sedan half buried under a fallen sign, trunk sagging but closed. The whimpering was sharp now, almost panicked. Matt knelt and tried the handle. Stuck. He wedged his shoulder against the lid, grunted, and it groaned open with a scream of hinges. The stink of fear and blood rushed out. Inside, curled atop a nest of filthy rags and straw, lay a large German shepherd. He was striking even in misery, long-limbed and broad-chested, his once glossy black and tan fur now matted with grime, legs twisted beneath him. Patches of his side were raw and furless, old scars and fresh wounds mapping his suffering. One of his amber eyes was swollen shut, but the other fixed on Matt wary, exhausted but flickering with the faintest hope. Matt's heart wrenched. "Easy, boy," he said gently, voice low and steady. "You're safe now." The dog trembled but didn't growl or snap. He looked as if he'd run out of fight, or maybe sensed something in Matt's presence that made resistance useless. Carefully, Matt reached in, hands practiced from years volunteering at Grace's animal shelter. He found wire twisted around the dog's hind legs, cutting deep, wet with blood. Muttering reassurance, he fished his pocket knife out, sliced the wire free, and gathered the trembling mass of dog into his arms. It was then that his hand brushed something cold and metallic under the filth a collar. Matt cleared the dirt, bringing his flashlight close. The inscription, battered but clear, read, "I belong to Grace." Matt froze. The name hit him like a blow. For a split second, the world tilted. Grace, his wife, the woman who turned every stray into a friend, who believed all lost souls deserved a second chance. Matt could hear her voice, bright with laughter, teasing him. "You've got a soft spot, Turner. I swear, if you ever meet a lost dragon, you'd take it home, too." He swallowed the ache in his throat. "Rusty," he said, almost without thinking. the name Grace had used for every stray shepherd she'd rescued since childhood, after the first dog who'd changed her life. At the sound, the dog's tail flickered, a ghost of recognition, as if the name reached something deep inside his battered memory. Just then, a figure shifted in the shadows near the junkyard office. Matt turned, flashlight catching the sallow, angular face of the junkyard's owner, Charlie Weeks, a man better known for keeping things than for kindness. He wore a grease-stained flannel and watched with a predator's stillness, lips thin and pressed. Charlie's voice was a sandpaper rasp. "You lost, officer?" Matt squared his shoulders, Rusty still cradled close. "This dog needs a vet. He's coming with me." Charlie's eyes lingered on the collar, then flicked back to Matt. "Ain't my dog. You want to take him? That's your trouble now." "Fine by me," Matt said. He turned, boots squelching in the mud, every sense alert until the fence closed behind him and the city seemed to exhale. Back at the cruiser, Matt settled Rusty in the passenger seat, wrapping him in his police jacket. The dog shivered, but made no move to bolt. He simply watched Matt, as if weighing the man's soul. Matt dialed the after-hours animal hospital. As he drove, he kept glancing over, studying the sharp lines of Rusty's face, the scars across his muzzle, the impossible coincidence of Grace's name on the collar. He remembered, with a bittersweet ache, the way Grace would kneel in the dirt beside a trembling animal, speaking softly, never pushing. She always said names mattered, that a name could be a promise, a memory, a hope. Matt stroked Rusty's head. "I don't know how you got here, boy, but you're not alone anymore." The dog's eyes fluttered closed in the warm air, finally safe enough to sleep. It was nearly sunrise by the time Matt finished at the vet. The wounds were not new but deep. The vet was gentle, her words hopeful, but warned that Rusty would need time and care to heal inside and out. Matt promised he'd give both. He drove home, the city waking beyond the fog, the world taking on a faint gold glow. He carried Rusty into the living room and laid him on a soft nest of towels by the fire. As the flames flickered and the dog slept, Matt sat beside him, heart heavy but hopeful. He couldn't wait to tell Grace. She would know what to do. She'd have some wild theory, some plan, a soft voice for the dog and a strong one for him. Matt imagined her laugh, her arms around both of them, her delight at fate bringing another Rusty into their lives. For now, the house was still dark and quiet, filled with the scent of damp fur and hope. Matt Turner watched the dog sleeping by the fire, his hand resting gently on Rusty's side, and thought for the first time in a while that maybe miracles did exist. He just needed to wait for Grace to come home and see it too. Matt Turner drove home just after dawn, the city glistening beneath a weak winter sun that made the icy sidewalks shine and painted long blue shadows across the faded porch of his modest two-story house. The neighborhood was quiet, a patchwork of craftsman homes and wind-battered trees. His hands, stiff from the cold and the events of the night, cradled the still-sleeping German shepherd Rusty in a gentle but firm hold. He glanced down at the collar once again, reading Grace's name, feeling the strange ripple of fate that had brought this battered animal into his care. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the heater kicking on. Matt's boots thudded softly on the old wooden floorboards. He settled Rusty on a pile of clean towels near the fireplace, stoked the dying embers, and finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. The familiar smells, coffee grounds, cinnamon, a hint of lavender from Grace's sweater on the coat rack, made the place feel safe, almost untouched by the chaos outside. For a moment, Matt imagined waking Grace, telling her about the miraculous rescue and the dog that bore her name on his collar. But the house felt emptier than usual. Matt called softly, "Grace?" He checked the kitchen, the living room, the study. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar. The bed was neatly made, the sunlight pooling over a single pillow. There was no sign of her. He felt a subtle unease, something instinctual. Grace was a tall, willowy woman in her mid-30s, with pale skin and light brown hair often twisted into a practical bun. Her warmth filled a room, her quick, clever humor and stubborn hope even more so, but she could also be secretive, prone to slipping away for hours, caught up in a cause or in her work as an animal shelter coordinator. On the kitchen table, between a stack of veterinary forms and a chipped blue mug, was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Grace's, but rushed, uneven. "Matt had to leave for work. Unexpected. I'll be gone a few days. Don't worry about me. Love you. There was a faint smudge on the margin, as if her hand had been shaking or the pen had caught on something rough. The signature, usually a little heart, was missing. Matt read it twice. The note's hurried tone gnawed at him, refusing to settle in his mind. Grace never left on work without warning, and certainly never left in the middle of the night. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It rang, then went to voicemail. He tried again, voice tight. Grace, it's me. Call when you get this. He scanned the hallway. One of her jackets was missing, and her mud boots, well used, always standing by the back door, were gone, but the rest of her things were in place. Matt's gaze caught a trail of muddy footprints leading from the back porch to the kitchen tile, and faintly, a few drops of something reddish-brown near the mat. He crouched, squinting. The substance wasn't quite the right color for ordinary mud, more like dried blood. His stomach clenched. Rusty, now more awake but still weak, lifted his head and whined. Matt approached, ruffling the dog's head. Rusty's eyes, one amber, one swollen, nearly shut, fixed on him, following his every move. The dog seemed anxious, paws shifting as if trying to get up and look for someone. Matt went outside, checking the yard. The winter grass was crusted with frost, but along the back walkway, he saw more of the reddish-brown trail, almost invisible unless you looked for it. It stretched out toward the alley beyond the garden gate, then faded. The padlock on the gate had been opened, the latch still dangling. He returned to the house, every muscle tense. Grace's absence now felt not like coincidence but like an alarm bell. He tried to rationalize, maybe she'd been called to deal with an animal emergency, maybe her phone had died, maybe this was nothing more than bad timing and winter worry. But his instincts, honed over years of police work and a marriage built on tiny, meaningful signals, screamed otherwise. He sat with Rusty for a while, talking quietly as he examined the dog's wounds. He cleaned the deepest gash on Rusty's leg, wincing at the rawness. "Hang in there, boy," Matt whispered. "We'll figure this out together." The dog whined softly, nudging Matt's hand with his nose. By late afternoon, Matt was restless. He started pacing, looking for anything he might have missed. Grace's office was tidy, but her laptop was gone from its usual spot on the desk, a detail that struck him as odd, since she never took it for quick shelter runs. He checked the laundry room, the garage. Nothing out of place, except a small, unfamiliar silver key wedged into the heel of Grace's left boot, now tipped on its side by the back door. The key was thin, not one he recognized, stamped with an unfamiliar symbol. Matt held it up to the light, puzzled. The day crept toward dusk. Matt reheated some soup, coaxed Rusty to drink water, and fed him soft kibble. The dog ate hungrily, eyes never leaving Matt. There was a certain urgency in Rusty's behavior, whining when Matt stepped out of sight, scratching at the back door as darkness fell. Once Rusty tried to drag himself toward the door, then barked, a sharp, desperate sound that sent a chill up Matt's spine. Matt followed the dog, opening the back door and switching on the porch light. Rusty sniffed, then pawed at a spot on the threshold. There, half hidden by the doormat, was a fresh, bloody smear. Matt's flashlight caught the edge of something, a torn piece of Grace's scarf. He picked it up, hands shaking. That night, sleep would not come. Matt sat in the dark living room, Rusty pressed close by his feet, the small silver key on the coffee table, the note unfolded and read again and again. Every so often, Rusty would wake and whine, then bark, each sound slicing through the stillness like an accusation. Sometime after midnight, Rusty went into a frenzy, barking, pacing the hallway, and then, with sudden determination, nosing at the mudroom door. Matt, startled and half-dreaming, followed. The dog led him straight to the end of the hallway, where a thin line of dried blood curved along the wall and out through the back. Matt's heart pounded. The evidence, hidden at first glance, now screamed of struggle and fear. He pressed his palm to the cold glass of the door, the night outside silent except for the wind. His house, always the center of warmth and safety, now felt like a shell. Matt sank onto the stairs, Rusty's head in his lap, and swore to himself. He would find Grace, no matter what it took. Above them, the city's first snow began to fall again, gentle and cold, blanketing every trail. But inside, the last of Matt's certainty had vanished, replaced by determination and a storm of unanswered questions. The cold lingered in Portland's air, and the sky hung low and colorless for days, pressing down on the quiet houses and frosted lawns of Matt Turner's street. Each morning began the same. Matt walking from window to window, scanning for any sign of Grace, his heart heavy with questions, and the haunting feeling that his life had slipped sideways into a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Rusty, the battered German shepherd, was healing faster than Matt expected, though still limping and slow to trust. His wounds, cleaned and bandaged, had begun to knit closed, but some deeper injury lingered in the way he paced the house at night, tail tucked, ears pressed back, always sniffing the corners and pausing at the front door as if waiting for someone to come home. In the daytime, Matt juggled phone calls, checking every hospital, every friend, every animal shelter Grace had ever worked with. He left messages that grew more desperate each day, his voice rough from lack of sleep. He worked with the police in secret, knowing Grace would want her privacy protected, but it seemed no one had seen her, no one had heard from her. The only sound in the house was Rusty's quiet whining and the ticking of the old clock in the hall. As the hours crawled by, Matt began to notice a pattern. Every afternoon, just as the sun dipped behind the neighbors' cedar trees, Rusty would stand at the back door and bark a sharp, urgent sound that broke the silence. When Matt let him out, Rusty would make his way to the far corner of the backyard, circling under the gnarled apple tree where Grace liked to read on summer days. The tree was old, its bark twisted and split, the last shriveled apples clinging to the branches. At first, Matt thought nothing of it, assuming the dog was looking for a place to lie down, but Rusty began digging at the hard winter earth, sending clods of frozen dirt flying with frantic determination. On the third afternoon, Matt followed Rusty out into the yard, his boots crunching over the thin crust of frost. "What are you looking for, buddy?" he murmured, crouching beside the dog. Rusty's paws were muddy, his breath clouded in the frigid air, and there was an urgency in his digging that Matt couldn't ignore. Suddenly, Rusty's claws struck something solid with a metallic clang. He barked twice, high and insistent, then stepped back, whining softly. Matt brushed the dirt aside with his gloved hands and uncovered a small, rusted tin box, the kind Grace used to keep old postcards and childhood trinkets. The latch was stiff, but it popped open with a twist of the knife. Inside, carefully wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was a black USB drive, a folded photograph, and a thin, worn sheet of paper. Matt turned the photo over in his hand. It was a blurry shot, taken from behind a chain-link fence, showing the boneyard of the Collier junkyard in the weak gray sunlight. In the corner, half obscured by shadow, was the silhouette of a German shepherd, looking out through the bars of a filthy kennel. Matt's stomach tightened. He unfolded the paper, scanning the neat block lettering. A list of names, dozens of them each, with a date and a breed scrawled beside it. Some were crossed out. At the bottom, circled in Grace's handwriting, was one word: Rusty. Matt plugged the USB into his laptop at the kitchen table. The files were sparse: a spreadsheet tracking missing dogs across Oregon, receipts for large quantities of animal tranquilizers, and a few audio recordings. Grace's voice, low and steady, interviewing volunteers at the city shelter, asking about suspicious vans and missing paperwork. The last recording was the shortest. "If you find this, I need you to trust Rusty. He knows more than I do. I'm close, Matt. I love you. Tell them not all lost dogs are strays." Matt sat back, mind spinning. This was Grace always careful, always seeing what others missed. He realized, with a jolt, that the name Rusty wasn't just a memory. It was the dog now sleeping by his feet. His wife had saved this dog before, maybe more than once, and left a trail she hoped Matt would follow. The ache of missing her grew sharper, but so did his resolve. As dusk settled, Matt called his friend and neighbor, Sarah Cummings, to watch Rusty while he checked in at the precinct. Sarah was a retired nurse in her 60s, short and sturdy, with gray hair kept in a sensible braid, eyes crinkled with the deep kindness that comes from a lifetime spent easing others' pain. She greeted Matt at the door with a gentle hug, her heavy cardigan smelling faintly of peppermint. "Still no news?" she asked, voice soft but edged with worry. Matt shook his head, trying to smile for her sake. Sarah knelt beside Rusty, offering him a treat. The dog, usually shy, took it gingerly, allowing Sarah to scratch his ears. "Good boy," she murmured. "Grace always said you had a soft spot for the broken ones." Rusty's tail thumped weakly. Matt left for the station, determined to find any clue Grace had missed. He carried the tin box in his coat, thumb tracing the worn edge. He wondered how many other secrets lay buried in his own backyard, or in Grace's files, waiting to be unearthed. But for now, all he had was a list of missing dogs, a blurry photo, and the stubborn loyalty of a dog who'd survived what others hadn't. That night, as the temperature dropped and the city faded into sleep, Matt stood by the window, watching Sarah and Rusty in the yard. The old apple tree cast crooked shadows across the snow, and for the first time in days, Matt felt hope, a thin, insistent spark that maybe, just maybe, he was not as lost as he'd feared. The days grew colder and grayer as January bled into February, a hard frost setting into the bones of Portland's old neighborhoods. Matt Turner's world had narrowed to two things: the search for Grace and the strange, insistent energy of Rusty, who had begun to shed his old wounds but carried an unshakable anxiety. Every day, Rusty watched the front window, his ears pricking at every truck that passed, his gaze locked on the world outside as if he expected someone important, someone lost, to return at any moment. One morning, after poring over the USB files again, Matt made his decision. He printed the photo Grace had hidden in the tin, highlighting the familiar lines of the Collier Junkyard's fence, the unmistakable silhouette of a large German Shepherd behind it, and the half-visible license plate of a truck parked inside. The need to return there gnawed at him, stronger with every clue he uncovered. Matt called in a favor with his captain, a sharp-eyed woman named Lieutenant Paula Brooks, whose calm presence and square jaw exuded a no-nonsense authority. Paula had short, iron-gray hair, pale blue eyes, and a reputation for holding the line in a crisis. She listened quietly as Matt explained, her expression unreadable. "You think Grace went back to the junkyard?" she asked. "Or that something happened there?" Matt nodded. "That's where the trail leads, Lieutenant. I have to check." She studied him, then handed back the photo. "Be careful, Matt. And don't go alone." Matt took Rusty along, hoping the dog's memory might unlock something hidden. As they drove across the city, Rusty whined in the back seat, restless, his breath fogging the window as they neared the junkyard gates. The Collier lot looked more desolate than ever. Old cars sat like fossils in mud, and the heavy iron gate was chained, a for sale sign slapped onto the fence in bold red letters. Matt felt his heart thump. Just days ago, the place had looked alive, if only in the shabbiest sense. Now it seemed abandoned, as if scrubbed of secrets overnight. Matt parked a block away and walked up the cracked sidewalk, Rusty at his side. Each step made the dog more agitated, his muscles tense beneath his newly glossy coat, his tail low and stiff. When they reached the gate, Rusty stopped cold, barking with a wild, choked urgency, his eyes fixed on a spot deep inside where a row of shipping containers crouched in the gray light. Matt squeezed the dog's shoulder, whispering, "Easy, boy. I'm here." But Rusty kept barking, the sound echoing over the empty lot. Matt tried the gate, found it locked tight. He scanned the fence, eyes lingering on a small security camera mounted above the entrance, its lens shattered. A tangle of wires dangled from the box, exposed and brittle. Matt's pulse quickened. Someone had wanted whatever happened here unseen. He peered through the fence, searching for other clues. The tracks of a heavy vehicle had left deep ruts in the frozen mud, leading from the alley to the side lot. There, in the dirt, were fresh tire marks, far too recent for a yard supposedly closed for business. Across the street, a neighbor was shoveling snow from her sidewalk. She was a thin woman in her early 50s named Mrs. Hernandez, bundled in a bright green parka and old woolen mittens. She paused, watching Matt with curiosity. "Looking for Charlie?" she called. "He's gone, sold the place, packed up quick." Never seen a man so eager to leave her face, creased by years of early mornings and heavy work, softened with concern. "Hope he didn't cause you any trouble, officer." Matt thanked her, making a mental note. He returned to the fence, phone raised to snap photos of the damaged camera, the tire tracks, the faded for sale sign. As he did, Rusty suddenly lunged at the gate, barking again, then pressing his nose to a patch of fence where a scrap of plaid fabric was snagged on the wire. Matt bent closer and recognized the pattern. It was identical to the shirt Charlie Weeks, the junkyard owner, always wore. He pocketed the scrap, his mind spinning with possibilities. He called Lieutenant Brooks from the car, updating her in clipped tones. Paula listened, then promised to pull traffic cam footage from the streets around the junkyard on the night Grace disappeared. "If there was a truck in or out, we'll know," she said. Her calm steadied Matt. And Matt, don't do anything reckless. We'll move on this together. Back at home, Matt examined the scrap of fabric and compared it to the photos in Grace's files. It was a match. He logged onto the city's property records database and saw that Collier Junkyard had changed hands 2 days ago, the deed now belonging to an LLC with no listed phone number, just a P.O. box across town. Everything about the sale was rushed, the paperwork barely complete. That night, Matt made a list of questions and clues, pinning them to the corkboard in his office. Who destroyed the camera and why? What was in the truck that left those tracks? Where did Charlie go, and why did he sell so fast? And what was Grace looking for, risking so much, following a trail that led here? Rusty sat under the desk, his head on Matt's foot. Every time Matt's hand reached for Grace's photograph, the dog's tail thumped softly as if reminding him, keep looking. Matt emailed his findings to Lieutenant Brooks and set an alert for the property records in case the junkyard changed hands again. He went to bed late, exhaustion finally overtaking him, but his dreams were thick with barking and cold metal fences. At dawn, Rusty was waiting by the door, ready to search again. The plan took shape in the tense, flickering hours before dawn. Matt Turner met with Lieutenant Paula Brooks and Detective Tyler Kim in a cramped conference room at the Portland Police Department, the windows fogged with winter condensation. Paula, upright in her Navy uniform, radiated quiet command. Her eyes were steel blue behind rectangular glasses. Her voice, low and measured, was the anchor that held the room steady. Tyler Kim, their tech specialist, was wiry and young, with quick movements, tousled black hair, and a way of speaking that darted from subject to subject, but with a mind that missed nothing. He wore a puffy red vest over his dress shirt and kept fiddling with a silver pen, tapping it against the case files on the table. Matt presented the evidence: photographs of the junkyard, the list of missing dogs, the destroyed security camera, and the frantic script Grace had left behind. As he spoke, his hands shook, but his voice was firm. Brooks listened, glancing at each document, then nodded to Kim. "Do we have a green light?" Kim pulled up satellite imagery and a police map, showing the perimeter, the sheds, the maze of containers. "If we move at first light, there's minimal activity. The property's in legal limbo, no one will be expecting us." Brooks nodded, then met Matt's eyes. "We'll find Grace. Let's bring every lost soul home." By the time the tactical van rolled into position near the Collier junkyard, the morning sky was pale and streaked with icy clouds. 4 officers in black tactical gear fanned out, faces masked, radios crackling quietly. Matt moved among them, checking weapons and harnesses. He looked down at Rusty, now fitted with a bright orange police vest. "K9 Guest," scrawled in Sharpie on a tag, who stood close at his side, calm but alert. The shepherd's wounds had healed into pale scars, and his coat was glossy in the winter light, but his eyes remained haunted, amber with memory. The main gate, locked and chained, was cut open with bolt cutters. The team advanced in silence, weapons drawn, boots crunching over frozen gravel. The air reeked of oil and ammonia. As they neared the first warehouse, barking echoed from inside, panicked, sharp, a chorus of desperate voices. Kim stayed at the van with the radio, monitoring city feeds and backup units. Matt's heart thudded as he signaled the team forward. Inside, the darkness was thick and close. Their flashlights swept the shadows, revealing rows of metal kennels stacked too high, filthy and reeking. Dozens of dogs, German shepherds, Labradors, Belgian Malinois, even a few pit bulls pressed against the bars, eyes wild and muzzles raw. Some barked, some whimpered, some only stared, too far gone for noise. Many bore the scars and shaved patches of recent wounds. One shepherd, ancient and trembling, tried to stand, his legs giving way beneath him. Matt knelt beside the cage, his gloved hand trembling as he pressed his fingers through the bars. "It's all right, boy. We're here." Detective Kim's voice came over the radio. "More crates in the next building, smaller ones. Looks like a puppy mill operation alongside the working dogs." Brooks directed 2 officers to break the locks. The racket was overwhelming. Barking, metal groaning, men shouting orders, all echoing off the cement. In the chaos, Rusty did something Matt had never seen before. Instead of bolting for the open doors with the other dogs, Rusty pressed through the crowd, sniffing, ears pricked, nose working. He stopped, head cocked, then darted toward a narrow corridor at the back of the warehouse, almost hidden behind stacks of empty feed sacks and rusty machinery. Matt called after him, pulse racing. "Rusty, wait! The shepherd barked sharply, then paused, glancing back as if to say, "This way." Matt broke from the group and followed, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the gloom. The corridor was cold and damp, ending in a heavy steel door with no visible lock. Rusty sniffed the seam, whining, then pawed at the door with growing urgency. Matt pressed his shoulder against it, grunting, and the door gave way with a protesting squeal. Inside was a small, windowless room lined with stacked cages. The smell here was worse sickly sweet with neglect. In the very back, a tiny puppy huddled in a wire crate, trembling so hard its paws thumped the metal floor. Its fur was pale gold, its body small and thin, but its eyes were bright, almost unnaturally blue. The puppy held something in its jaws, a strip of soft plaid fabric torn and frayed at the edges, unmistakably from Grace's favorite scarf. Matt's breath caught. He knelt, voice shaking. "Hey, little one." "It's all right, you're safe now," Rusty whined, nose pressed against the bars, tail wagging furiously. The puppy hesitated, then dropped the fabric and crawled to the edge, licking Matt's gloved fingers. Brooks entered behind him, her eyes wide as she surveyed the cages. "We'll need animal control, medics god. How long have they been here?" Matt stood, the puppy nestled in his arms, and pressed the scrap of scarf into an evidence bag. Brooks put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find her, Matt. She's still out there." The officers swept the rest of the outbuildings, freeing more dogs, gathering evidence. Kim cataloged the crates and tagged each animal for the rescue team. By mid-morning, the lot was alive with the wails of sirens, vans from rescue groups, news crews, and the smell of hot coffee from a volunteer's thermos. Sarah Cummings arrived, her sturdy frame wrapped in an old blue coat, to help calm the animals. Her voice gentle, sure, and practiced from years as a nurse cut through the noise, soothing whimpering dogs with soft hands and kind words. Matt carried the puppy to her, explaining the scarf, the secret room, and the hope it brought. Sarah nodded, pressing her palm to Matt's arm. "Grace wouldn't give up on any of them." "Neither can you." Matt nodded, fighting tears. He looked at Rusty, standing beside him, wounded but unbroken, leading the way out of darkness. That afternoon, as the sun struggled to break through winter clouds, Matt filed his official report and called every hospital, every contact. He would not rest until he followed Grace's trail to the very end. In his living room that night, Rusty slept by the fire, the blue-eyed puppy curled against his belly, both safe for now in the flickering light of a home that still waited for its lost heart to return. The winter afternoon faded into a bruised twilight as Matt Turner walked the muddy grounds of the junkyard, boots caked and mind racing. The rescue teams were packing up, the last dogs loaded into city animal control vans, but Matt felt the story was not finished. Something urgent tugged at him every time Rusty circled the far warehouse, nose to the frozen earth, barking in sharp, frantic bursts. The blue-eyed puppy was safe now in Sarah's care, curled against her broad chest as she rode home in a battered Subaru, voice humming lullabies to ease the pup's trembling. But Rusty remained relentless, haunted, never straying from Matt's side for long. Lieutenant Brooks, clipboard in hand, found Matt near the back of the main building. She stood square in her boots, her weathered face set with concern. "Anything?" she asked. Matt shook his head, eyes following Rusty as the dog pressed into a narrow alley between two rust-streaked shipping containers. Brooks glanced at her watch. "We've searched everywhere. If there's anything left, it's buried deep." She started to walk away, then paused, studying Rusty as he scratched furiously at a battered steel door half covered in tangled wire. "Your dog's got a nose for trouble," she muttered, a trace of respect in her tired tone. Rusty's barking intensified. Matt ran over, heart hammering. The door was welded shut at the bottom, but the top hinges were rusted and loose. Matt grabbed a crowbar from a pile of salvage, bracing his shoulder and wrenching hard until the metal groaned, then gave way. A bitter, close air rushed out, thick with the scent of mold and fear. Inside, the room was low-ceilinged and dark, light spilling through the crack of the open door. It took a moment for Matt's eyes to adjust. In the far corner, slumped against the wall, was Grace. Her hair hung in tangled ropes around her pale face, clothes torn and smeared with dirt. She looked impossibly thin, cheekbones sharp, wrists nearly swallowed by the handcuffs binding her to a metal pipe. But her eyes snapped open at the sound, and for a heartbeat, Matt saw the old fire burning there, fierce, defiant, alive. "Matt?" Her voice was a dry whisper. She tried to sit up straighter but winced. Rusty pushed past Matt, barking once, then whining as he pressed his nose to Grace's knee, tail whipping wildly. Grace sobbed, one hand curling around the dog's broad head. "You found me. You both found me." Matt rushed to her, hands shaking as he fumbled with the keys he'd taken from the night guard hours earlier. Grace leaned forward, exhaustion and relief crumpling her at once. As he unclipped the cuffs, he noticed the thin silver chain tangled around her wrist, the old charm necklace, a tiny heart and dog tag hanging from it. The clasp was broken, the chain freshly knotted. Matt blinked, a strange recognition prickling at the edge of memory. Rusty nudged Matt, whining, then pawed gently at Grace's lap. She managed a wan smile and whispered, "He saved me, Matt. When they brought me here, I thought I was alone. But Rusty was with me. They locked us up together. He kept barking, biting, making noise, until one of the guards left the cage open. Rusty broke the chain and shoved the little silver key under the mat for me to find. He never gave up." Matt's mind reeled. The silver key he'd found in Grace's boot, the chewed clasp on her necklace. All this time, Rusty had been trying to lead him back. He knelt, brushing Grace's hair from her face, fighting tears. "I'm here now. You're safe." Grace let her head rest on his shoulder, breath hitching. "I knew you'd find me. I left the USB, the list everything I could. But I thought I'd run out of time." Her words were a string of hope and fear. She glanced down at Rusty, who sat, tail wagging, eyes on her as if nothing else in the world mattered. "He protected me when no one else could. Even when they hit him, he got back up. He's the reason I'm alive." Lieutenant Brooks appeared in the doorway, shining a flashlight into the gloom. "We've got medics on the way." "Can you walk?" Grace nodded weakly, and Brooks helped her to her feet, supporting her thin frame with a practiced hand. Brooks's voice, so often brisk and unyielding, softened. "You did good, Turner. Both of you." She glanced at Rusty, then at Matt. "We'll need a statement, but not now. Now you need rest." Outside, the cold had deepened. Matt wrapped his arm around Grace, leading her toward the ambulance. Sarah met them at the lot's edge, still in her nurse's scrubs under a thick blue jacket, her round face streaked with tears. She pressed a mug of hot tea into Grace's trembling hands and whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart." The blue-eyed puppy peeked from her jacket, tail wagging shyly at Grace's battered face. Matt rode with Grace in the ambulance, Rusty leaping in at their feet despite the protests of the EMT, a lanky, freckled man named Jonah, whose easy, joking manner usually lightened every call, but tonight was replaced by gentle concern. Jonah, a former Marine medic, checked Grace's pulse and blood pressure, then handed Matt a warm blanket for her shoulders. His red hair stuck out beneath a battered beanie, his movements quick and careful. "You'll be all right," he murmured to Grace. "You're tougher than you look." As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Grace's hand found Matt's. She closed her eyes, her grip fierce despite her frailty. "Don't let Rusty go," she whispered. "He's family now." Matt nodded, tears brimming, as Rusty settled at their feet, watchful, content, guarding them both as Portland's lights flashed by in the snow-spattered dark. That night, as Grace slept in a clean hospital bed, Matt sat beside her, one hand resting on Rusty's back. He replayed every step, the clues, the risks, the moments he nearly gave up. But through it all, it was Rusty's stubborn loyalty that never wavered, the dog's refusal to abandon hope that had brought Grace home. Sunlight slipped through the hospital blinds, casting pale stripes across the pale green walls as Grace slowly woke, her body stiff but her mind razor-sharp. Matt Turner had barely slept in the visitor's chair, but his hand never left hers through the endless beeping of monitors and the quiet comings and goings of nurses. Rusty, ever loyal, dozed beneath the bed, rousing at every shift or sigh. The blue-eyed puppy from the kennels slept curled on a folded towel by the heater, tiny and soft but with a fighter's heart, already imprinting himself on the small hospital world. Detective Tyler Kim arrived early, a cardboard tray of coffees in hand and his red vest swapped for a faded gray hoodie. His sharp eyes darted over the charts and then softened at the sight of Grace, awake and alert. Kim was Korean-American, mid-30s, quick-witted, and always a little too restless for the paperwork that filled his days. He greeted Matt with a nod, set the coffee by Grace's bed, and pulled a battered laptop from his bag. "We found something," he announced quietly so as not to wake the puppy. Traffic camera footage from the night Grace disappeared, plus new logs from the vet clinics. It's not just dogs. Someone's been moving tranquilizers and cash all over the county. Grace propped herself up, wincing, but the fire in her gaze was undimmed. "Charlie Weeks?" she asked. Kim nodded grimly. "Weeks, and someone higher up. Look." He turned the laptop to show them. Frozen frames of the junkyard gate, a blurry image of Charlie Weeks arguing with a tall man in a puffer jacket, face shadowed. Behind them, a truck loaded with dog crates and barrels. Matt recognized the jacket. He'd seen it in photos from an old fundraiser, worn by Captain Barker, one of the department's senior officers, a man with a broad chest, thinning hair, and a politician's easy smile. Matt's jaw tightened. "Barker? He's been handling evidence on the missing dog cases for months," Kim's mouth twisted, "and moving a lot of money through shell accounts. We've tracked enough for a felony case, but it's thin unless we get a confession or more physical evidence." Grace touched her locket. The charm Rusty had bitten free. "There's more at the junkyard. I heard Barker and Weeks arguing. There's a second storage container, blue, parked behind the office. That's where they moved the records." Her voice broke, hoarse but determined. Paula Brooks arrived next, fresh from an overnight shift. Her navy uniform was crisp, boots muddy from the streets, and she carried herself with an exhaustion that was more mental than physical. She listened as Kim outlined the findings, her eyes growing colder, angrier. "If Barker's involved, we go by the book. Internal affairs, warrants, the works. No room for mistakes." Matt nodded, the weight of betrayal tightening his shoulders. Rusty, sensing the tension, stood and pressed his head against Grace's thigh, tail thumping gently. He was older now, the lines in his face deeper, but his eyes still gleamed with undying loyalty. Grace smiled, ruffling his fur. "He remembers everything, even when I couldn't." The blue-eyed puppy, newly named Sky by the nurses, wobbled over, licking Grace's hand. Sky was smaller than Rusty, her fur still thin, but her energy was infectious. Nurses would visit during breaks just to watch the two dogs play, offering a touch of joy in the grim corridors. Later that day, Matt met with Sarah Cummings at his house. Sarah brought over a casserole and a stack of letters from animal lovers all over the city, cards of hope, small donations, even homemade dog treats. Sarah's energy, which had always seemed inexhaustible, was a steady warmth. Her cheeks were pink from the cold and her hair was tightly braided down her back. She hugged Matt tightly. "You brought her home, Matt. That's what matters. Now finish the job for everyone's sake." Sarah's own daughter had once gone missing for 3 days after a bus accident, and the trauma had carved a fierce compassion into her heart. She pressed a photo into Matt's hand, an old shelter dog that Grace had adopted out months ago, now fat and happy, lying on a sunlit rug. "There's always hope," Sarah said quietly. That night, Matt pored over the evidence, pinning photos and string to the corkboard in his study. Each new clue, the tire tracks, the USB, the traffic footage, the scrap of Charlie's shirt, the hospital records, and Grace's whispered recollections began to form a map. Rusty sat nearby, Sky tucked under his chin, both dogs sensing the storm of purpose in the room. The next morning, Paula Brooks filed a formal complaint to Internal Affairs about Captain Barker and secured an emergency search warrant for the junkyard and Barker's home. Kim and Matt would assist the search. Meanwhile, Grace, still weak but fiercely insistent, recorded a sworn statement from her hospital bed, detailing everything she'd witnessed: the transport of dogs, the money exchanges, Barker's threats, and how Rusty had saved her life more than once. The district attorney, a tall, wiry black woman named Elaine Porter with sharp cheekbones and a reputation for fighting for the underdog, reviewed the files personally, vowing to burn this whole operation to the ground. As the investigation deepened, more victims surfaced: other dogs, yes, but also owners who had been intimidated or paid off, and even a young man named Eddie from a nearby shelter who'd been forced to keep silent after witnessing Barker's men roughing up strays. Eddie was tall and thin, with nervous hands and a shy smile, only 19 but old in the eyes from what he'd seen. Matt interviewed him gently, promising protection. Eddie produced a key card for the blue container and a battered phone full of hidden videos, enough to tie Barker and Weeks to a dozen crimes. By week's end, Paula Brooks led the warrant team, Matt and Kim at her side, as they raided the blue storage container in Barker's house. Inside the container, medical records, ledgers, stacks of cash, and dozens of collars, each marked with the names of dogs now rescued or still missing. Kim photographed everything, hands steady, voice tight with anger. Rusty, brought along for the search, sniffed at the cages and whined, as if remembering the dark days before his rescue. Brooks's jaw clenched, and she called the DA from the scene. "We have what we need." Matt returned home that night, bone-tired but triumphant. He found Grace asleep on the couch, Skye curled in her arms, Rusty at her feet. Matt sat quietly beside them, heart full. As snow began to fall again outside, the world felt a little safer, a little more right than it had in a long time. The cold, bright morning of the ceremony dawned across Portland, city blocks bathed in sunlight that glinted off old brick and puddles still shining with last night's rain. Matt Turner stood at the front steps of the Portland Animal Rescue Center, his hand entwined with Grace's. She wore a simple navy dress, still thin but with color returning to her cheeks, her hair braided down her back by Sarah that morning. Matt wore his best uniform, hat tucked under his arm. His eyes followed Rusty, their German shepherd, who was the true reason for the crowd that had gathered in the small park across from the center news crews, city officials, police in dress blues, animal rescue volunteers, and dozens of local families. Beside the podium, Rusty looked as dignified as any hero could, a bit older now, his fur thick and brushed, a red and blue bandana tied loosely around his neck. The blue-eyed puppy, Skye, sat at his feet, a little bundle of hope who never strayed far from Rusty's side. Matt found himself glancing at them often, feeling the familiar surge of gratitude and awe. He glanced at Sarah, who stood among the volunteers. Her face was lit with pride, her sturdy frame wrapped in a floral shawl, hair silver in the sun. She caught Matt's eye and winked, mouthing, "You did it." Lieutenant Paula Brooks presided over the ceremony, her uniform crisp, expression softer than usual. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying. "Today, we honor bravery, not only of our officers, but of those who have no words to tell their story." She gestured to Rusty, who, as if on cue, sat a little straighter. "Because of this dog's actions, dozens of lives were saved, and a criminal enterprise was brought to justice." A ripple of applause swept the crowd. Journalists snapped photos. Children pressed close, eyes wide. In the front row, Detective Kim Hare, even messier than usual, held Skye for a moment, then set her down so she could rejoin Rusty. Kim flashed Grace a quick grin, handing her a bouquet sent by shelter volunteers. Just as the applause faded, a commotion began in the crowd. Rusty's ears shot up, his nose twitched. Without hesitation, he trotted off the dais, ignoring Matt's gentle call. The crowd parted in surprise as Rusty threaded his way to the side of the park, where a woman with auburn hair pushed a wheelchair through the grass. In the chair sat a small boy, maybe 9, slim and pale, his legs thin beneath navy sweats. His eyes were bright blue, startlingly familiar, and when Rusty reached him, the boy gasped and burst into delighted tears. "Max! Max, is it really you?" the boy called, voice trembling. The woman, his mother, knelt, stunned. "Lucas, honey, what?" Rusty's tail beat the ground. He barked, soft and joyous, pressing his head into the boy's chest as Lucas's arms wrapped around his neck. Grace clapped her hands to her mouth. Matt remembered the name Lucas Prescott from the lost dog list in Grace's files. A family who had moved to Oregon months ago and whose dog, Max, had disappeared during the chaos of the move. The boy's joy was overwhelming. The crowd grew silent, then burst into applause and tears. A TV reporter lowered her microphone and simply wiped her eyes. Matt approached quietly, knelt beside Lucas, and asked, "Did you know Rusty before?" Lucas nodded so hard his hair bounced. "His real name is Max. He saved my life once, when I had a seizure. We lost him the day we moved. I thought I'd never see him again." The boy's mother wept, hugging both Lucas and Rusty. "You brought him home to us," she whispered to Matt and Grace. "Thank you." The ceremony ended with hugs and laughter, with Skye yapping excitedly and every child wanting a turn to pet the hero dog. A city councilwoman gave Rusty a gold medal engraved with "For Courage and Loyalty Portland 2025. Photos were snapped, news stories filmed, and for the first time in a long time, the center buzzed with nothing but hope. That evening, Matt and Grace walked home together, Rusty and Skye running ahead. The neighborhood had turned out to welcome Grace home. Neighbors offered casseroles, homemade cards, and stories about their own pets. In their backyard, Matt fetched a young apple sapling from the trunk of his car. The original tree, battered by storms and time, had to be cut down when Grace disappeared. Now, with her safe and the shadows gone, it was time to plant anew. They dug the hole together, hands dirty, laughter mingling with memories. Grace pressed her palm to the cool earth, her eyes bright. "This is for every lost thing that finds its way home," she said softly. Matt nodded, steadying the tree as she packed the soil. Rusty nosed the roots, Sky tumbling in the grass. Sarah came to help, bringing a watering can and a few words of blessing learned from her grandmother. Even Detective Kim arrived, bearing dog treats and his ever-present laptop, insisting on capturing the moment for the center's website. As twilight deepened, neighbors gathered in the yard, swapping stories under the soft porch light. Paula Brooks stopped by, still in uniform, but with a smile as warm as summer. "You all deserve this," she said. "You're a family, and this city is better for having you." Grace rested her head on Matt's shoulder as Rusty and Sky curled up together beneath the sapling. Lucas and his mother joined them, sharing stories about Max Rusty, and how he'd always had a knack for being where he was needed most. Matt looked around, at Grace, at their friends and neighbors, at the dogs who had endured and triumphed. He felt the ache of everything lost, and the healing in everything found. Night fell, cool and gentle, over the new apple tree. For the first time in months, Matt let himself believe. Every wound could heal, every lost thing could be found, and some stories, against all odds, would end in hope. Sometimes when the world feels darkest and hope seems lost, we are reminded that miracles are real, not always in flashes of light, but in the small acts of kindness, courage, and love that change a life forever. Perhaps it's not just chance that brings lost souls together. Perhaps, in the quiet moments when we dare to believe, God works through the hearts of people and animals alike, guiding us home and showing us that no one is ever truly abandoned. In our own lives, we may face nights of fear, loss, or loneliness, but let this story be a reminder. Compassion matters. Never underestimate the power of reaching out, of believing in a second chance, or of following the quiet voice inside that says, "Do good." Sometimes what we call coincidence is really grace. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone you love. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, or simply write Amen if you believe in hope, second chances, and God's miracles in our everyday lives. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will lift your spirit, restore your faith, and remind you that you are never alone. May God bless you and your family. May every lost thing find its way home, and may we all become someone's miracle. Comment Amen if you agree.